We're talking today about transforming leadership with Dr. Ann Skelcher. So today's masterclass is going to be an hour long. If you've attended before, you know that we usually have 30 minutes, but this is a valuable session. So before we get started, I do want to welcome you in to join the conversation on social media. Our hashtags are hashtag TEVE and hashtag TE Masterclass. And if you've been to one of our sessions before, my name is Tila Beischer. I am a CSM. And I host the majority of our masterclasses, but today we have a special guest host, Dr. Ann Skelcher. And welcome, Ann. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to give you a bit of a bio on Ann, and then we'll pass things over to her to let her guide what our session is going to be today. So Ann has worked at Thoughtexchange for 5 years as a senior engagement consultant. She comes from a 34-year career in education where she served as the classroom and special education teacher for 8 of those years, and then moved into leadership roles as vice principal and principal, both elementary and secondary levels. And her doctoral program in educational leadership centered on school crisis recovery and provided opportunity for her to look reflexively at the role of a school leader. She's also shared her work on school culture, parent engagement, and student assessment in BC, Alberta, and Nunavut. So welcome, Ann. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tila. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk about the why behind Thoughtexchange. So we're going to talk a little bit about transforming leadership. Actually, not a little bit. We're going to talk a lot about transforming leadership today. We're going to talk about why Thoughtexchange is an important tool for you as you transform leadership, and how it inherently reflects some really important leadership and community values as well. And then we're going to look at Thoughtexchange in action and its many uses and how you can put it to action in your workplace. And then we're going to do some question and answer, and hope you can stay with us right to the end because we're really interested in hearing what those questions are.
We are actually going to start off our session today with an exchange, which is one of our favorite ways to start any of our virtual events. So what we'd love to hear from you, and this is our presenter mode. If you haven't seen this before, this is a way to join the exchange just using your phone. You can use the QR code or head to tejoin.com and type in this 9-digit code. And our question for you to start this time together is, why do you feel Thoughtexchange is important? So I'd love for everyone to hop in. We're going to spend 3 minutes on this, and then we're going to use the results to guide the rest of our time today. And I'm going to click on play here. And I will also paste the link in the chat in case any of you need that as well. So if you can hop in and share one thought and then rate the thoughts of others, and we'll be able to have a really robust rated set of lists to go through. All right, so we're at 0 seconds. I'm going to click close on the exchange, and we're going to look at the results together. Perfect. So here are the top thoughts that came up.
I was going to say the quality of the thoughts in this exchange are absolutely fantastic. I think you've covered the presentation already in the exchange. It's fabulous. And yes, it's such a quick way to hear from many voices, and we're going to touch on that piece about the loudest individuals today, and as well as the analytics that are there we'll touch briefly on the analytics that are there around the data.
That's the top thought, the second top thought.
I'm really glad this one was brought up. The whole idea of where there's agreement and where there's disagreement is just so important. Talking around exchanges around racism currently, we're really emphasizing the importance to look at not just the top thoughts and where there is agreement, but looking at all thoughts, and where there is discord and disagreement is more important than ever. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, let's look at this third top thought before we move on from this.
I'm not sure the context, but I also really appreciate this thought around the non-threatening way. I think oftentimes when we find ourselves in some crowdsourcing approaches like town hall meetings where those loud and angry voices are there, particularly introverts, we just get quieter and quieter through the time. So this is a really non-threatening way. And it also, not having your identity known in an exchange creates some safety around that as well. So thank you for this.
Perfect. So we will share a report, a leader report with this. So all of you attending today have a copy of this too for a refresher. And we're going to move into a bit of a presentation now from Ann about transforming leadership.
Thanks, Tila. So as I talked about earlier, we're going to look at the transformation, the shifts in leadership. And these shifts have really come to us as a result of some shifts in values. It's going to be on our next slide. So these shifts in values are really the root of the transformation in leaderships. Values like inclusivity, diversity, equity, transparency, and as we're seeing at this present time more than ever, the need to bring people together. It's not an imperative anymore. It's not optional anymore. It's imperative that we respond to these values. And leaders in all organizations, all kinds of organizations, are responding, and it's resulting in a significant change in how leaders lead. It's really a paradigm shift in leadership, one that makes a shift from less top-down to more collaborative leadership. And these aren't new, but I think the pressure on these concepts at this moment in time in our history are more than ever. Where we once asked people to fit into our offices and schools, now there's a focus on belonging and leadership and the organization creating a space for all. Leaders once talked in terms of, I want this from you, to now they're saying, I want to do this with you. We're in this together. Let's do this together. And there's a shift from the trust me perspective to leaders now intent on speaking the truth, transparently speaking the truth, and being willing to hear the truth, not just to hear what they want to hear. And then there's been a shift from this idea of competent leadership, the leader who says, I get stuff done around here and it runs well, to a more compassionate leadership framework. So a leader who says, I seek to hear and understand your perspectives, and we can create what we need together. We share in the ownership of this. If there's other shifts in leadership that you're observing or that you're experiencing, I'd love it if you pop them into the chat box right now, and we can come back and touch on those. So to lead in this way requires that leaders understand the experience of their employees and stakeholders, and to bring them into direction setting and decision-making processes to collaborate on issues, challenges, and changes that affect them. And now, with COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter and the economic downturn, there's an urgency to tackle really big and significant problems, like responding to racism, transforming learning, the challenges of working from home, or then keeping staff safe when they return to work. And leaders like you are tackling all of this at the same time that you're attending to the usual challenges of keeping your organizations at least stable and ideally moving forward. What's more, leaders need to accomplish all of this in a way that aligns with those values that showed in that previous slide. And I would suggest that making the paradigm shift in leadership is more important now than ever. So I just want to acknowledge you have a huge amount on your plates, and that's an important acknowledgement, and we get that. And at the same time, you've had a lot more on your plate. We have too. It's been amazing to see how the use of Thoughtexchange doubled in the first 30 days of the pandemic and has grown way beyond that. I think we were at 500% more than usual last week. And it's because our leaders, our Thoughtexchange leaders like you, knew that they needed to make informed decisions and they needed to make them quickly. Leaders urgently needed to hear from their people, and people really needed to know that they were being heard and they were being cared for. So crowdsourcing in this way brought our leaders some significant gains such as understanding the challenges faced by their employees and in schools, their students and families. They also gained the ability to respond appropriately. Some, like this entire state of Connecticut, for example, were in exchange, and they changed the direction that they were heading. They decided to keep schools closed for the remainder of the year once they heard from their people in a statewide exchange. And then these leaders also gained trust because they knew that they were being heard. But I also want to talk here about the subtext of what's going on in that story. In addition to those gains that I just mentioned, leaders were also building the assets of the organization. The assets that they were building are actually three kinds of capital. The first one being social capital, and I know you all understand this idea of relationship and the quality of relationships within the organization and between the organization and its stakeholders. And when social capital is high, change comes with greater ease. So reaching out to ask questions such as, what challenges are you experiencing, or what hopes and concerns do you have about our future, signal care and concern. It's kind of like that friend who reaches out because they care, not like that friend who only reaches out when they want something. And then the other kinds of capital, leadership capital they were gaining, was process capital or process capital, which comes from having good, fair, and transparent process. You might have heard our CEO, Dave McLeod, put it this way. He says, never about me without me. Asking a question of people impacted by a decision, such as, what are your concerns, thoughts, and questions as we make plans for reopening? And then closing that loop by reporting back on what you heard and to share out the actions and decisions you'll take keeps people with you through the decision-making process and lets them trust that you'll provide good, fair, and transparent process now and in the future. And the third one is ownership capital. It's really based on the premise that people support the things they help to create. So when you lead through change in a way that involves people in all the stages of that change, it helps ensure their support, a sense of ownership of the outcomes, and an investment in the success of those outcomes. So whether in crisis and working towards a new normal, no matter what force brings change with you and no matter the magnitude of that change, leadership capital will increase your organization's resilience in the face of crises and enforce change of any kind. And it will also better meet change with innovation, which is the thing that we all aspire to in our organizations. Building trust in leadership and trust in relationships, trust in process, and assurance of ownership requires that leaders have a tool that lets them crowdsource. One that lets them hear from and respond to thousands of employees and sometimes tens of thousands of stakeholders to address any kind of issue, make any kind of decision, and address any kind of challenge. And trusted advisors like Harvard Business Review and Gartner are with us in this message, where they say that crowdsourcing will result in better decisions and there will be greater support for those decisions. Gartner also tells us that crowdsourcing is no longer a nice to have for leaders. It's a must-have as a leadership tool. However, the right tool has not always been there, and we heard this in your thoughts in our exchange. The traditional tools don't always reflect those changing values that we referenced earlier, and they aren't always effective within new leadership paradigms, and they come with their own set of challenges. What often happens is leaders, in fact, when they crowdsource, hear from loud and mad voices when what they want to do is surface the wisdom and intelligence of the crowd. Let's think about town halls for a minute, I think, which we referenced earlier. The loudest, sometimes the angriest voices dominate, and the quiet people get quieter. Town halls aren't always inclusive. It's hard to fit everyone into the room after all, and they aren't always diverse. So sometimes we lean into focus groups because they are more manageable, but they don't accomplish the inclusiveness and the diversity of voice that we need them to. And both take more time and are costly. And then in terms of social media as a form of crowdsourcing, well, all of you with a Facebook page know that they can be challenging. Like when mad people have their voices amplified and make a controversial conversation unhealthy and misinformed. So most often leaders have relied on surveys, and it makes sense that they do, because while surveys are a safer way to crowdsource, they do control those loud and the mad voices. There are issues with them. They're not all that open. They fail to capture what people really think, and that the questions gate the nature of the response that you can make. Often they don't meet the test of transparency, and that they fail to provide an effective feedback loop, so people don't always know what the outcome was and how it was decided. And then there's a whole issue around when was the last time you couldn't wait to participate in a survey. They're just often not that engaging. So a new crowdsourcing tools will be necessary, and Thought Exchange is being designed to overcome those challenges that come with focus groups and social media and town hall meetings, and help leaders acquire crowdsourcing as a new kind of discipline, one that aligns with and reflects current values and really aligns with those current leadership paradigms as well. The Thought Exchange version of crowdsourcing lets leaders have a healthy, inclusive exchange in a way that surfaces the intelligence of their crowd and builds those three important kinds of leadership capital. So how does it accomplish that? Well, it ensures diversity as it lets leaders hear from lots of people, and you can hear a wide-ranging perspectives as well, and that was mentioned in the exchanges too. People participate in a truly independent manner, like in their pajamas at home on Saturday morning. And they're also away from that mad and loud voices. They're away from the influences of their peers or influence of leadership as they would be in a staff meeting. It's decentralized, and it lets leaders draw on their individual knowledge or their local knowledge and perspectives rather than simply providing feedback on what the leader has proposed or their assumptions that the leader has made, as we see in a survey. And then results are aggregated, so participants see them, and leaders are able to use the real-time qualitative responses to find answers and solutions and make informed and well-supported decisions. So how does it do this? Well, you have all been in, and earlier you were in an exchange in those 3 steps. So I want you to reflect back on the exchange we did, or at any exchange you've been in, and make a mental check for the following. So in share, were you challenged to independently answer an open-ended question? Did you notice that you were able to enter as many thoughts as you wanted and were able to say whatever was on your mind or in your heart about that topic? Did safety come to mind for you and that you noticed that your name wasn't associated with your thought? When you moved to star, did you notice you rated your own thought and realized that it could rise to the top or not? And that you rated the thoughts on their merit alone without identifiers for the people who shared them? When you read the thoughts of others as you were starring, did you find yourself considering some new perspectives? Did you read something you hadn't ever thought of before? Or did you find yourself empathizing with someone? In Discover, did you become curious about what the results would be and what would resonate most with at least with the group and what was going on in the community? And then transparency, did you notice that the process is transparent? You could see the results and you could learn what's important to everyone. And were there other things you noticed as you participated? If so, just feel free to pop them in the chat. And I'm just going to check the chat for a minute. Thanks, Tila, for those links in the chat's awesome. So I just want to do a bit of a recap before we move forward. So supporting the move from top down or move from less top down, leadership to compassionate leadership, leadership that's inclusive and collaborative. Thought Exchange is a tool that ensures that every voice is heard, lets everyone hear one another, so it builds that culture of trust, transparency, and collaboration. The resulting solutions go beyond finding a single one best answer, and instead lets leaders hear the many truths and perspectives of their people and make better informed decisions and inspire the community to have ownership of those decisions. As a leader, you're able to work with the results to prioritize the actions and make the most efficient and informed decisions. Getting things done and achieving your goals in a way that aligns with those important values and the kind of culture you aspire to build. And you're doing this all the while you are building social process and ownership capital that will well serve your leadership and your organization. So let's look at how others are putting Thought Exchange into action and spark some ideas on how you can put it to use, other ways than what you've been doing. So we have 3 ways of talking about use cases for Thought Exchange. The first one references basically the things that you need to get done. Leaders can tackle any number of leadership tasks, ranging from building a really strong, cohesive team to improving organizational efficiencies. You can make small and major decisions, build strong, long and short-term plans, manage change of any size, and this is my favorite, test assumptions that kind of exchange that you can use when someone pops into your office and after you put a plan into action and they tell you a week later, it isn't working and we all agree it's not working. And then you can go out and test that assumption. As you look at each of these tasks on the screen, do the files on your desk come to mind? If so, please pop them into the chat so we can share them. Do you have a plan that needs to gather some feedback? Do you have a team that's not working so well, or a virtual event coming up where you need to gather some insights and questions from people? And I want to point out two things about this. Sometimes exchanges can stand alone, and other times there's a need to involve people in a sequence of exchanges. So for example, in building a reopening plan, the first exchange might start with a question: what are our most important considerations as we plan to reopen? This exchange is going to inform your planning. And then once you've built the plan itself, the second step is a proposal exchange to present the plan back to people and ask for their thoughts and their questions. The thoughts can help inform revisions, and the questions can help inform a communications plan around the actions you're taking. And then down the road, you'll want to determine if it's all going well, so you'll do an exchange to identify what's working and what's not. And then sometimes exchanges are iterative in the sense that one leads to another. And for example, an example comes from the state of Connecticut, an exchange I referenced earlier. And as a result of what leaders heard in their first exchange, they reached out to students across the state. And the question they asked is, if learning from home were to be part of school next year, what changes could be made to make it more engaging and effective for students? And in this exchange, they heard from over 18,000 students who offered up more than 19,000 thoughts, which really reinforces that people impacted by a decision really want to be heard. And before we leave this, I just want to highlight that the questions you see on the screen come from our question library, which is available to you when you create your exchange. And then there's this way of looking at use of thought exchange. And that's to think about the different areas and topics about which you need to reach out to those who are impacted and who you want to have ownership, like those students in Connecticut. So currently we're seeing a lot of work being done in the areas of mental health and well-being with questions such as, what are the most important things we can do to better support your well-being at this time? In the face of the economic downturn, questions like, what are the most important things to consider as we begin to plan our budget for this fiscal year? This isn't asking people to create the budget, but you're able to understand their priorities and do your best to reflect those. And whether your priorities are about professional learning or building staff morale or running a virtual event on any topic, an exchange can support this work. And oh, by the way, if you haven't gone in and seen our exchange gallery, have a look. It lets you search for exchange ideas by topic and provides related questions. You can see several questions related to that topic, and then with just a click of a button, you can launch an exchange. On our website, our collection of customer stories, as well as our question library, will give you an expansive view of the many, many topics addressed by our leaders so far. This is my favorite way of identifying use of putting thought exchange to work. This is what we call this the hierarchy of questions. It's similar, as you will all recognize, to Maslow's hierarchy. And yes, we will provide that link, Ashley. So similar to Maslow's hierarchy, the hierarchy of questions reminds leaders to consider, for example, safety and security issues to ensure people are feeling safe before they begin to address some of those higher levels of the hierarchy when they're moving into visioning and transformation. For example, we often have seen new leaders go into an organization and they want to start revisioning. They're full of energy and commitment to start that revisioning, but oftentimes they do so before establishing that people are feeling safe and secure within the organization and safe and secure with them as a new leader. The hierarchy can also guide thinking about a change process as it prompts leaders to consider the impacts and implications for a particular change. So let's say, for example, that you are enacting a new policy, it's being put in place, and leadership will then have to explore its impact on alignment, for example. And you want to know, does it align with other policies? Are there other policies we need to change so that we're all in alignment here? And also, are people aligning with the new policy? They might also need to reflect on the policy's impact on culture. Has it impacted people's perceptions of their sense of belonging within the organization or the meaning that they draw from their work? And then the third way that the hierarchy prompts us to consider changes around the time and nature of our outreach. So for example, and similar to my first example, but leaders who reached out for input related to transformation or process during the beginning of COVID-19 received instead a lot of input about people's sense of safety and security and uncertainty. So the hierarchy really reminds us to involve people where they're at in that moment. This next slide gives you really general questions that relate to each one of those steps in the hierarchy. And then the next set of questions that we're going to share with you are examples of questions that actually our school and district leaders have used to illustrate how they are using the hierarchy. So as I described, the impact of COVID-19 necessitated a lot of focus at the bottom of the triangle. What do we need to consider? Those kinds of safety, security questions. But now with greater stabilization, somewhat, and the need to reimagine so much of how things are being done, there's a need to move back up that hierarchy towards vision and transformation. So I saw some flashes come through on in the chat about this hierarchy. You can see why it's my favorite, I think. So we're going to get you back into an exchange and ask for your questions and insights about what you've heard. Please stay with us and get those things in, because we really want to hear what you're thinking and questioning. And we won't have time to respond necessarily to all of your thoughts today in this session, but we will, as Tila said, send out a report and answer the questions and respond to those insights that we didn't get to in our session.
Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to click play on the exchange and I will copy the link and paste it in the chat. I have to agree with you, Anne. In my work, I agree that starting with the hierarchy of questions and considering where you're at is one of the most important parts of exchange design. So glad that we got to highlight that for people and also that it landed so well. All right, so Anne and I are gonna mute ourselves. We need that music again, but we'll mute you so you can share your thoughts and rate the thoughts of others. We're giving you a little bit more time. You have 5 minutes for this exchange, so take all the time that you need here.
And I'd sing, but it'd scare you right out of the session, so hang in and look forward to responding to your questions and insights.
All right, so that's our 5 minutes. I'm gonna stop the exchange here just by clicking on the stop button up at the top, and then move over to the Discover view, and then we can talk through these top thoughts that came up here.
I think you folks here are brilliant. The things that you've pulled out are fabulous to read. You know, I think this one is just key. We talked earlier about that friend, you know, in the social capital, that friend who reaches out because they care. Well, on the other side of that person reaching out because they care is that person who needs to be heard and needs to be listened to. So that true friend also listens, and it might be uncomfortable at times, and it might challenge the basis of your relationship and connection. But I think very often these are sources of change and innovation. When we get uncomfortable, there's something that needs to be changed.
Yeah, I like that highlight, Anne, of that growth comes from being uncomfortable too.
Being out on that edge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I really appreciate this comment, and it's difficult, I think, when I'm going to talk a little bit in terms of the education people out there, and that's my context from which I come. But I think very often in education, we have come from with degrees and learning and a huge history of huge history of education behind us and ways of doing things. And oftentimes have seen or see ourselves as the experts in it. And I think more and more that paradigm has shifted, where we are more partners with our families. We work more closely with our students around their learning, the assessment of their learning, and we're moving ourselves out of that expert place. And in order to work and collaborate that closely and bring others in, we have to listen. And I just think that's such a key message there. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad this resonated too. Yeah, that finding that place of where people are at and beginning and moving them forward from there and doing that check. Are people feeling safe in our organization? Are they feeling secure with me as a leader? Can I, I always say leadership isn't something, it's something that we're given. It isn't just a given. People give that to us. They grant us the ability, or the grant us a position of leading for them. And if people aren't feeling safe and secure with us as leaders, they're not going to grant that leadership. And that really stymies everything you want to do in terms of change and stabilization even, and in creating innovation. That thing about important questions is we see that in the hierarchy, but we also see that within the exchanges. And why we want to create that question library and the exchange gallery, because it's full of those questions that we know will give us some good results. So researchers always remind us that garbage out is garbage in, and so that finding that really right question is critical.
Yeah, that's a big part of why CSMs emphasize that so much. As we're working with all of you new leaders, getting you trained up on how to design them, we're also talking about what are our question design best practices. So how can you ask for it? And it's always considering what's your context. So where is your stakeholder? What type of conversation that you need to. All right, let's move to the next thought here.
Yeah, I mean, how else? I mean, besides a survey, can we gather this many thoughts and find those solutions? And yet surveys often don't give us those solutions. They don't bring in the wisdom of the crowd. There's that gating by the questions that we ask. And when we have these great big decisions to be made, you have these great big decisions to be made and these really important solutions to find. How do you get those people into it in a way that aligns with what you want to accomplish with that inclusivity, by hearing diverse voices?
Sorry, I just skipped to the next one. I learned that we have a new feature in presenter mode where the down and up keys allow you to switch between thoughts. So now we just learned something.
I think there's something coming up about events here, which we'll have to touch on presenter mode for sure. Yes, those progressions of questions, that keeping people together with you through a change in the planning, in the proposal stage, and then evaluating. That evaluating and assessing is an ongoing process, really. Like there's just so many steps there to where it's important to engage people in each one of those. And something can be assessed and be going really, really well in the first week of it or the first month of it, but it's very different later on when they've had time in, or other things have begun to impact on that change. So it's really key to think about those progressions of questions and to keep people, most importantly, to keep people connected with you all the way along. And yeah, building that trust first. I think that hierarchy of questions has been a huge gift for all of us. All of us who are thinking about processes and change, supporting our customers in change process internally. And I think it's a gift for leaders as well. There's a piece on that I didn't speak about, which talks about growing trust. And that arrow up, really highlights that when we start and we focus and we ground in that place wherever people are at, then we gain trust. And then as we move up and we keep people engaged with us in that process, that trust only builds. And that takes us then back to that whole idea of those three kinds of leadership capital, that you're going to have they trust that you're going to have a process that is fair and transparent and open. They trust that they're going to they own this. There's an investment in the success of that plan. And that really does begin with starting from that ground and moving back up. It's a great way to chart a path. I love the way you frame that. Actually, we might use that chart a path moving forward if we can. This is fabulous. I think that there is a story coming out very soon about this, but making these town halls safe and incorporating some of the TE features is possible. I'm going to let Tila speak about the presenter mode because she is the expert on this one.
Yeah, so this experience that you had today, we call this presenter mode, and it is available in every single exchange that you run. If you want to get some quick training on it, we have a little bit on our help site, and then your CSM can also support you with learning how to use it. But the value of it is in a really short amount of time, you can open up a really large conversation with all of your attendees at your event and allow them to have this safe space to talk. The other way that you can use it is if you want to enrich upcoming virtual events. And so, for example, a virtual town hall, and you want to hear what's most important from people who are going to be coming to drive the agenda that you're going to build for that event, you could run an exchange ahead of time and use the priorities that rise to the top to really inform the agenda. That way, you know that the presentations that you're giving and the answers that you're answering are really valuable. Another way that some people will actually use exchanges to enrich virtual town halls or virtual events is to answer questions. And so that could be something like maybe you're running one of those reopening plan exchanges and you've asked, what are your thoughts and questions about coming back to school in the fall or about our plan to come back to school in the fall? Maybe you host a virtual town hall and you address all of the questions that came up in the exchange. It's your way of closing the loop back and allowing it to be in a live space too. So 3 options. You could use it in the event, you could use it to plan the event, or you could run the whole event around the idea of answering the questions and the thoughts that have come up in a larger exchange too.
Yeah, yes. This is an interesting comment because I think it's in many ways, it's like wherever you need to have a conversation, there's a way to use Thought Exchange to enhance that conversation. I was walking with a friend of mine yesterday and sharing with her about some work that we're doing in Thought Exchange. And she looked at me and she said, don't you wish that you had Thought Exchange when you were a principal of our school? She was a teacher on my staff. And she said, I can just imagine, she said, how you could have used it. She said, you know, you could have even used it reminding us about important insights that we had. I can't remember the exact example, but she used, but something like, you know, you were always telling us how important it was to be there for give our students important messages and signals that we're there for them, like saying hi in the hallway, not just walking by, or greeting them at the door in the morning, and how you could have used an exchange in that way to have people be reminded, and to ask for other ways that they are helping stay connected to their students. And I thought about staff meetings and how much staff meeting time is used for administrivia, and there's so little time for conversation. And so my friend Nikki said, yeah, like just imagine how much we could have gotten accomplished on those other big important things by using exchanges and staying connected around those things in between staff meetings. So yeah, I so agree with this comment. We're going to give you a lot more at other sessions on how to use Thought Exchange effectively. And I hope this has given you a framework, you know, around those tasks and topics in the hierarchy to use it to your advantage. You know, sometimes we hear leaders say, well, we're worried about overuse of Thought Exchange, but I have to say, you know, our culture at Thought Exchange has been built on exchanges from its very beginning. And so many major decisions and small decisions, so many plans have been in effect. You know, we started talking equity and around gender equity in particular, and now that conversation is shifting to racial equity and making sure that when we are addressing those kinds of issues, all of those things, those big things, have been handled with exchanges, and then little things too, like, you know, or how things are going to get taken care of in offices, or how are we going to arrange things and make things work efficiently in our offices. So there's just so many different ways, and it's never occurred to me that we're overusing it. And I think there's a big exchange out to everyone at least once a week, if not more. And then within our teams, there's other exchanges happening. So yeah, I hope it's given a more expansive view and taken away some of that concern, because we would never hold back from having a conversation on a topic. So there's no need really to hold back on using Thought Exchange. It's giving people voice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads perfectly into the little bit of housekeeping that I wanted to do. And that is to invite everyone who's on the call to one of our Getting Started workshops. So we host these every Thursday, and they're a really good place to learn how to design exchanges. And so today we kind of got the framework of different use cases. We got a bit of the why, and so we have a really strong understanding of maybe what your next exchange that you want to run is, or what the exchange sequence that you want to run is. So I want to make sure that we invite you to our Getting Started workshop, and you'll find this, I'm just popping it in the chat, and we'll also send it in a follow-up too. They're an hour-long session. They happen every Thursday at noon PST or 3 p.m. EST, and we go through how to design an exchange, how to take a use case and consider all of the different aspects. Think about where it is in that question pyramid or the question hierarchy too. So you're all welcome to register for that to learn how to kind of apply the philosophy that we learned today. Great. And that's about it. So we're going to follow up with a leader report today to share all of those thoughts that came up, both in that first exchange that we ran and then the second exchange too. Ann, do you have any closing comments to add on?
Well, my closing comment is, how does time fly so fast? You know, when I was teaching, my worst skill was pacing. I think it's proven that it's still a challenge. I can't believe how time has flown today. And just really appreciate your reflectiveness in both of those exchanges, and for being here today. And I hope that, you know, think about Thought Exchange as there is some learning curve, and this is why we're providing these master classes. Tila's doing such a great job with them, and we really hope that you'll hop into those Getting Started sites. There is a lot of learning in the beginning, and then it just becomes part of how you get things done and part of your leadership. So thanks for joining us, and it was an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for being here too, Ann. It was really valuable to learn this with you. And thanks everyone too for joining. So if you want to hop off now, we'll share a recording of the session and some resources a little later in the week.
Enjoy your day, everyone. Thanks.